From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Another big one today as the Broncos pick up the option of Von Miller. That's right, $7 million. They're going to pick up his option. He is going to be a Denver Bronco this year. From what you understand, take it from the Broncos searching for a restructure with Von Miller and how this kind of was hanging in the balance all this last week, all the way up until last night when finally a decision was made.
Yeah, the Broncos were trying to get a restructure. We knew this. This is stuff everybody been reporting on. That the Broncos were trying to get restructures out of Kareem Jackson and Von Miller. Kareem was adamantly against that. Von Miller was, I'll say, a little more malleable on it, but really it didn't go anywhere as far as getting that done. And so it had come down to the Broncos were kind of starting to put feelers out and see what replacements for Von Miller would look like and would cost. And the sticker shock from the free agent market, when you looked at what Floyd got, Leonard Williams, all these guys, what these guys are getting, the sticker shock from that right away was like, okay, this is not, we're not capable of replacing Von Miller's production at a percentage of cost. It's going to cost us almost more to come out here and do it. So we might as well just stick with the guy who knows the scheme and knows the locker room, knows the culture, and has been the face of our franchise for a decade. So George Paton decided to do a get-together with Von Miller last night and see where he stood on the whole thing and if he wanted out. And they had a little sit down and they got to chatting about it. And George just asked him point blank. He said, Von, do you want to be a Denver Bronco? And Von said, yeah, I want to be a Denver Bronco for life. And George said, all right, we're going to pick up your option and we'll go from there. And so that's really kind of how that came about.
That was an important moment, though, because there was speculation and a possibility there that if Von says the other way, if he says, actually, I kind of want to see what my options are.
Right,
I'm looking for a little bit longer-term deal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for something else. I think I can get more money on the open market.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of being
home to Texas.
That's right. I'm tired of being on a team that's had several losing seasons that I don't know if this season is going to be a winner or not. Mm-hmm. There could have been a multitude of things he said there. Mm-hmm. But that was the thing George Paton needed to hear.
Right. And that was exactly what they were looking for. They wanted an invested Von Miller in being a Bronco. And now both sides get a prove-it year. George Paton gets a year to prove to Von Miller, hey, we're building a winner here. Hey, the foundation is set. I'm building a winner. And Von Miller gets a year to prove to the Denver Broncos, hey, I can still perform at the high level that I used to 3 years ago.
It was really smart, though, of George Paton, too, because it gives him cover. If Von Miller would have come back to him and said, actually, I want to test. I want to see what my options are. I want to check the open market.
He would have been blamed for letting a Denver icon go, even though Von would have wanted to go.
Exactly, but it gives him a little bit of cover in this respect because eventually he'll get up there and do a press conference and he would have been asked by the media, hey, what happened with Von Miller? He'd say, I asked Von. He said he wanted to leave. Mm-hmm. That would have given him cover.
I don't think George Paton would have said that. George Paton's not the guy that throws players under the bus.
It isn't even throwing under the bus. He said, hey, Von Miller wanted to see what his options are. That's not necessarily anti-anything.
No.
It's where he's at in his career. Look, let's be honest here, Ben. Contracts don't usually play all the way out.
No, every contract is a 2-year deal with team options.
The NFL is all funny money beyond a certain point.
It's all 2-year deals.
The fact that Von Miller got to the end of his contract is substantial. It just never happens.
It rarely happens, especially outside of quarterback. It rarely happens.
But the fact that he got all the way through to the very end of this, including a team option without a restructure, is something, especially when you consider an injured year. You consider him having a down year in sacks, even though he was still top 3 in the league in pressures.
Right.
The fact remains that it hasn't been what the Broncos are paying him to do over the last couple of years, but the Broncos recognizing the value, as you put it. And we know just from a couple of years ago when Bradley Chubb was a rookie what this looks like, what this pass rushing duo looks like with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. I mean, almost 27 sacks combined between the two guys.
Right.
So this is the thing. Like, You made the right call for the Broncos. I know there were some people out there that were like, this is weird for the Broncos. I'm not exactly sure why they're doing it this way. There's a multitude of reasons. And in the end, free agency actually did dictate why the Broncos brought Von Miller back, on top of the fact that it's a win for the organization to keep an all-time player around who still might be able to play at a high level.
You weren't going to be able to replace his production on the market at an appropriate cost. So, and Malik Reed, I like Malik Reed, but he's a rotational, situational pass rusher. That's what he is, right, at least right now. Now, we saw a massive jump from here, year 1 to year 2. I'd love to see another one, year 2 to year 3. But Malik Reed is not, I don't think, a guy you go into a season confident as a starter on the outside on a team that has some aspirations, to be honest with you, some playoff aspirations.
Right. I mean, it's more or less echoed. I mean, I know there were some people out there saying that the Broncos were missing in free agency, when the reality is this is exactly what they wanted to do all along. They wanted to bring back Shelby Harris. They said that was a priority. They said they wanted to bring back Von Miller. They did that. These are wins for George Paton. In the end, like, some people will frame this as the Broncos sort of accepting their fate, that only the players that they have currently here are going to want to play, and maybe they're feeling like they're overpaying. It's quite the opposite. You're holding on to pillars of your team, guys that uplift the rest of the locker room. So I couldn't disagree with any kind of negative opinion about this any more than I am. Because the fact remains that the Broncos set out to accomplish these things, and they're doing them. The more I looked into Ronald Darby, the more I like him. I got to be honest. Our guy, Cody Rourke, does a fantastic job with Locked On Broncos. Mm-hmm. He did a breakdown of Ronald Darby today. It was really, really good. And do you realize that Ronald Darby only gave up 2 interceptions last year until he got to the playoffs, when he gave up 2 in the wild card? He had his worst game
touchdowns?
of the year. Yes.
You said interceptions.
Sorry.
Oh.
He only gave up 2 touchdowns all year long.
Right.
Until the final game, the wild card game, where he gave up 2. Like, he had his worst game of the season in the wild card. But up until then, he had been nails, and especially in the red zone. He'd been unbelievable.
And who were they playing in that wild card?
Yeah, well, the eventual Super Bowl champion.
Just some guy named Tom Brady.
Yes. And they were starting Heineke at quarterback on the other side.
Right. They weren't moving the ball. They were on defense quite a bit, and you know how that happens.
But I'm just saying, like, he only gave up 2 touchdowns the entire year up until that last game.
That's pretty good. I thought he played a lot better last season. If you look at the tape, Washington, because I thought it was a better scheme fit.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, Hall of Famer Steve Atwater on the program. What does he think about the Broncos' moves so far in free agency? What does he want to do at quarterback? We'll get to it.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Steve Atwater joining us here on the show. Steve, let's get to some of the news around the league, more specifically for the Broncos. And I want to dial in on the quarterbacks first here, because the Broncos are, if they were looking for a hedge out there, if they were looking for a backup to compete with Drew Lock, that well is drying up just a little bit, as now Andy Dalton is off the board, Jacoby Brissett, Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, a lot of the top names in free agent quarterbacks are no longer available. So what would you like to see the Broncos do in competition with Drew Lock?
Who else is left? Mitchell Trubisky, that's it?
Mitch Trubisky, Alex Smith, but I mean, it gets pretty thin after that.
Yeah, there's really not much in free agency.
Yeah,
I think if you want a guy, you got to trade for them.
Trade? Who would you trade for right now?
Well, you got Gardner Minshew out there. You got Nick Foles, who in his time with Pat Shurmur went 14-4 as a starter with 40 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. I'm just putting it out there.
Deshaun Watson is
who?
I know KJ's going, man. So
Oh, do you?
He's not gonna be politicking for us anymore.
Yeah, well, that's yeah.
I mean, you still got Alexander Johnson.
I was going to say, to be fair, the guy on the team that knew Deshaun Watson the best is actually Alexander Johnson, who knows him dating back to high school.
All right, good point.
I'm just saying.
Maybe he can put in a good word.
I mean, I don't see him on Instagram doing the lobbying, but.
All right, so Steve, what are those options? What's available in free agency, or a trade for Nick Foles, maybe Sam Darnold if the Jets make him available, or Gardner Minshew? What do you like as the Broncos option, because they said they want to bring in more competition for Drew Lock?
Oh man, but the options so limited now, man. We can't go into training camp without any competition. We just can't do it. Now. Does that mean we'll get a quarterback in the first 3 rounds? I don't know, but I don't like the choices that are left, unless you were to trade for a guy that was good. But the guys that you mentioned, Gardner Minshew, I'm not interested in that. I'd rather roll with Drew Lock. I was hoping that we get a chance at Jameis Winston, but with Drew Brees retiring, he's got a good situation down there in New Orleans, and they re-signed him, so hey, that's off the table. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's already gone. So, hey, man, most of the good options in my eyes, they've washed up. And, hey, that's to Drew Lock's benefit. And, hey, Drew Lock, he just still got to put in that work. But, I mean, I don't know who's available. I don't think nobody's going to trade one of their certainly not their starting quarterback unless, hey, like you say, maybe the Jets may try to trade Sam Darnold. But, I mean, aside from him, who else would trade him?
Well,
their starting quarterback or backup quarterback.
Well, as I say, the Bears just signed Andy Dalton, so he's going to be their starter, and they've got Trubisky and Foles that they're going to have to get rid of at least one of them, maybe both. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be drafting Trevor Lawrence, so Gardner Minshew doesn't make any sense there anymore. And then you just mentioned the Jets, who are either going to roll it back with Darnold or draft Zach Wilson there at number 2, and that would make Sam Darnold expendable. So I think there's options.
Yeah, of those options, Sam Darnold, that's the only one that makes sense for me. I wouldn't do Gardner Minshew. For me, it's Sam Darnold or you're gonna get somebody in the draft.
Knowing what you know now, looking at where this team is, the options they picked up, the players that they let go, would you still be, air quotes, all in on a pursuit of Deshaun Watson?
Like I said, I don't know if I ever was in that camp of just, going all out, because it's gonna cost you some years in draft picks and that. And for me, I'm just not for that. And I'm not 100% sure that they're gonna let them be available as well. They had rumblings of, hey, if you want to sit out, you sit out, but you're gonna be playing here with the Houston Texans. And eventually some team is going to do that and not let the player dictate, what happens in a transaction like that. So yeah, I'm not crazy about, like I said, selling the farm to bring in Deshaun Watson. Is Deshaun Watson a heck of a player? Yes. If Deshaun Watson came in, then you almost have to trade Drew Lock, because Drew Lock's not going to want to be backup, and he would more than likely be the backup quarterback, or they would probably make a move to get rid of Drew Lock, and I don't think that's in the plans right now either.
Steve, let me ask you about Phillip Lindsay. The Broncos announced today that they're going with an original round tender on Phillip. They're going to go second-round tenders on Tim Patrick and Alexander Johnson. That's not a surprise. But with Phillip Lindsay, there was some debate, especially once we realized Melvin Gordon is not going to serve any kind of suspension. Now it looks like Phillip Lindsay is going to test, which most of the time when these situations occur, I mean, heck, even C.J. Anderson got like 9 offers when the Broncos put an original round tender on him. Phillip Lindsay is going to have a market, so it doesn't look like he's coming back. The Broncos will have some decisions to make there at running back, but it seems unfortunate that it wasn't able to work out here with Phil.
Yeah, that's another one. He and K-Jack, man, I'm a little bit, I'm disappointed. Shed a tear, because Phil Lindsay, man, he's a guy who, like I said, has a ton of heart. He loves the Broncos. He grew up a Broncos fan, went to CU, and, got a chance to play right here in his hometown. But again, it just didn't seem like, he was a fit for the offense that they're trying to run right now. And, Phillip does a lot of things well, and it didn't look like, we were kind of utilizing everything that he did well.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, we talk quarterbacks. What are the Broncos' options for competition for Drew Lock? We'll get into it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, let's go over the quarterback options as they sit right now. We'll get into the Deshaun Watson stuff coming up here in a little bit, but let's go over the quarterback options as they sit right now, because it was a very busy day in NFL free agency as it relates to the Broncos' options at a competition quarterback. You had, Andy Dalton going to Chicago. He went to the Bears. Jacoby Brissett went to Miami. Tyrod Taylor went to Houston. And all of a sudden, this quarterback market, which wasn't necessarily of a lot of guys that were very exciting, but they at least offered experience. And the Broncos do value a certain amount of that if they're bringing in somebody for competition. So what's left, at least as far as the free agents go, Mitchell Trubisky, Alex Smith are a couple of names that are out there. And after that, it is kind of a who's who. We get into the Brian Hoyers of the world, and that's not really competition for Drew Lock. So what do you think about the free agent options that are left, and where do you think the Broncos might likely go here?
Well, I don't think Alex Smith is an option simply because I don't think he has the tools to execute what Pat Shurmur does. Pat Shurmur's offense is mostly based on mid-level throws, and Alex Smith is not that guy. He's just not. As far as Mitchell Trubisky goes, I don't think that's an option either. Everybody's trying to make the Vic Fangio connection. I'm not exactly. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. I don't know that Vic particularly cared for Mitch Trubisky. So, I don't know that that's the direction they would go either. I think that if you're a Broncos fan and if it's not going to be Deshaun Watson, and for right now he hasn't even been made available, then I think that you have to look at what are the other options. And the other options really kind of are Sam Darnold, Nick Foles, and Gardner Minshew. And I think you have to look at if any of those three kind of fit what it is that you do, what the cost would be for them in terms of capital you have to give up, and then what the actual cost would be in terms of bringing them in. All three are cost controlled. Nick Foles costs the most at around 6.5, I think, if you bring him in. I have to go back and look at the numbers, but and then Gardner Minshew and Sam Darnold don't cost much at all. They're on rookie deals, so. I think you have to look at that and what it would take to get them. Sam Darnold will be the most expensive to trade for in terms of draft capital. Nick Foles probably second, Gardner Minshew probably third. I mean, you probably only have to give up like a fourth or fifth rounder to get Gardner Minshew.
What I do want to bring up before we get too far down that is that you had reported that the Broncos weren't even in on Andy Dalton. Like, that was one of the top names that were considered in free agency, and the Broncos didn't even make a call on Andy Dalton. So for all the people out there that thought, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense because Andy Dalton would push Drew Lock. He brings a certain level of consistency. Even if he doesn't bring the upside that you're ultimately looking for at that position, you know what you're getting with Andy Dalton. And then it makes sense for Chicago, I guess, if they're going to have Andy Dalton and Nick Foles, if they hold on to him, battling it out up there in Chicago. I guess, it doesn't sound very exciting to me, but you kind of, again, know what you're getting there. The fact that the Broncos didn't make a call, though, is very telling, at least in my opinion, on a little bit of the way they viewed this quarterback group out there.
Right. They did not make a call on Andy Dalton at all. There were some reports out there that they were the other offer and stuff like that. None of that is true. That is absolutely false. They did make the exploratory call on Ryan Fitzpatrick, just a single phone call. But once they found out from his agent that it was going to be double-digit millions, they weren't in that market. And I don't think Ryan was really in the market for the Denver Broncos either. I think he wanted a team that was considered a contender, was already had already been to the playoffs recently, that kind of stuff, rather than a build which he was just a part of there in Miami. So I think that he wanted to be on a winning team that had already been a winning team. Not that he doesn't think Denver can win, but you get the point. I think that those two situations right there I think you're right. They do tell you where the Broncos looked at this, where they were, and where they are on this. And I get a lot of questions from people asking, why haven't the Broncos made a move yet at the quarterback position? And the answer is quite simply because they don't have to. You can still, you don't have to box yourself in yet. You can still sit there and eyeball the Deshaun Watson situation, which they are doing, and see. And you don't have to make a decision just yet. Now, there will come a point where you have to make a decision. If one of those three quarterbacks gets traded, then all of a sudden you've got to make a decision then. You either have to go for one of the other two, or you've got to and walk away, or you're sitting there and you're all in on Watson and you're just going to keep Driscoll and roll with that. And I think that would be a mistake. So I think that's the point where if Sam Darnold gets moved, Gardner Minshew gets moved, that's the point where you've got to make an internal decision and pull the trigger. But right now you don't. And so I think that if you're comfortable with any of the three, then I think that you can sit there and kind of sit back and survey the situation just a little bit longer. It's kind of like people asking why they hadn't tendered Lindsey and why they hadn't tendered all those guys, because they didn't have to. They didn't have to pick up Von Miller's option until they picked it up. I think what they're trying to do, I think the way they're trying to do this is to be patient. And I know the problem with that is the fans are not. The fans on social media, whatever, they're not patient.
But you can ask yourself, even if you're the most ardent Broncos supporter, and maybe you don't completely believe in Drew Lock, you can also ask yourself, would you have rather they make a play and pay double-digit millions to any one of these quarterbacks that went off the board today. And I don't think any Broncos fan would have been doing high fives at their office if they heard Andy Dalton was coming here, or Tyrod Taylor, or maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know there were some
people
Broncos
excited
fans
about that, but let's be honest.
But again, it's another stopgap, and the Broncos have had plenty of those. And I see more often than not Broncos fans saying they're just done with the stopgaps, like done with this. Bring in somebody that might have some upside. We were talking to our guy Andrew Mason on Twitter earlier today, and that's what he's pounding the table for more than anything. He's like, look, bring in Gardner Minshew, because there's at least a chance there that he does something more than what he's been. All the rest of these quarterbacks, they are who they are, and that's an okay thing. You can make a career out of that, being just to a certain standard that teams trust you if their starter gets hurt. But more often than not, those guys are not going to ever be starters again unless there are injuries to plan A at the quarterback position.
Well, yeah, but that's the other part of this is Drew Lock is that guy. Drew Lock is the guy that if there's a chance that he becomes something else, because if Drew doesn't, they're going all in on a quarterback next year. And this is operating under the assumption, again, that Deshaun Watson is not coming here. And that's what this is about. So the idea that you'd bring in Minshew over Foles is really, Drew Lock is the guy you're betting on to take that jump.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.